Hey guys, welcome to this review of the AirSeconds 6.3 polycotton tent by Decathlon. Decathlon is the IKEA of sports. Sure, they're French instead of Swedish and they don't serve meatballs, but at least in large parts of Europe, they are the default destination if you're looking to buy something that's good enough to get you started. They sell good products that are cheap enough to be expendable. This is what made Decathlon the biggest sports retailer in the world, but it's also something that I think rubs them the wrong way because they don't want their stuff to be expendable and they are invested in at least appearing to be an ecologically minded company. Whether they actually do enough is up for debate, I suppose, but I will say this, it's a lot easier to be green when you're Patagonia and your cheapest fleece is 150 euros than when you're Decathlon selling fleece sweaters for 12 euros. So I tend to believe their ecological ambitions are honest and not just greenwashing, and I believe this tent is part of that because a lot of the tents that Decathlon has sold over the last decades have indeed ended up in landfills. I live close to one of the biggest music festivals in Europe, and the number of small tents that simply gets left behind when the festival is over is mind-boggling. And many of those are indeed Decathlon tents, not because they're particularly crappy, but because they have a huge market share here and they make a lot of cheaper models. The AirSeconds 6.3 polycotton, and I'm sorry it took me so long to get to the actual subject of this review, is about as far removed from these throwaway tents as you can get. This is Decathlon's effort to make a quality, heavy-duty family tent designed to last you many summers. What makes it different? Well, first of all, it's quite the heavyweight. At 45 kilograms, it's easily 4 times as heavy as the lightest 4-person tent that Decathlon sells, and 100 times as heavy as the lightest hiking tent that I own. And most of that weight comes from the fact that it's made from polycotton, which, surprise, surprise, is a blend of polyester and cotton. Cotton canvas is a traditional tent fabric that a lot of high-end manufacturers still swear by because it's a durable, breathing fabric that is generally nicer to live in terms of temperatures and noise than synthetic fabrics. Polycotton takes those advantages of cotton and adds things like extra strength, lower weight, and protection against mold. Quechua's blend is actually pretty heavy on the polyester. Many tent manufacturers use a polycotton that's 65% cotton, sometimes 50% cotton. Decathlon's polycotton is only 30% cotton. That's not necessarily a bad thing. Like I said, canvas is heavier and this is already quite weighty, but it does mean that if you're looking to buy something that gets you the same atmosphere, the same livability of classic Dutch tent manufacturers like Karsten or De Waard at less than half the price, well, this is probably not it. I don't really know whether to review this as a 4 or 6-person tent. I mean, it's marketed as a 6-person tent. You can use it that way, but then it's kind of a dorm tent with not much living area. But I guess if you have a setup with a tarp or a different kind of tent as a daytime living area, then you could make that work. Or if you use this as a base camp in nice weather, why not? Me, I've used this as a family tent myself for 4 people, holidays in Belgium and France, and that's what I assume most people will buy it for. You can leave the 3rd bedroom at home, by the way, if you're not using it, save some space and weight. It's nice to have the option to use this with 6 people, but there is a trade-off because putting the 3rd bedroom in that spot did have some implications for the way that part of the tent is designed. There's not that much of an awning, and you certainly can't leave the door open in light rain the way you can with some other similar designs because it'll rain right in. Not a big deal, but I would have liked to be able to sit in the shade without opening the doors to the living area to bugs, especially since the windows are fairly high up. They don't extend to floor level, so if you stay inside, you don't get a full view of your surroundings. The smaller AirSeconds 4.2 polycotton comes with a slightly larger awning. It weighs about 10 kilograms less, but the living space is considerably smaller. So it would be nice if Decathlon could come up with some sort of awning or matching tarp like the ones they have for their teepee-style tent. I've mostly used the tent in warm weather, but just when I was fearing that we wouldn't be able to test the waterproofing and the stormworthiness, we had a serious thunderstorm in France, straight up 80 minutes of rain, lightning, and thunder. So, does it leak? Now, it doesn't leak, but in extreme situations, it can be prone to wicking. That's not uncommon. It happens when the tent fabric is saturated with water and an object touches the inside of the tent, the way it did here with the fairy lights. So you may want to double check that in the evening when you expect rain during the night. Wind hasn't been an issue at all for us. I've read some reports of people having troubles in plus 75 kilometers an hour winds, but of course at that point, many tents and even houses would be at risk of getting damaged. Let me go over some of the things that I like. Setup is quite easy once you figure out which side is the front. You lay it out, stick the corners, inflate the tubes, attach some rods, stake everything down. If you've ever set up a tent like this, you'll be right at home, and if you haven't, it's not a steep learning curve. Folding up is always a bit trickier with inflatable since you have to make sure that you get all the air out first, but again, pretty straightforward. There's a wheel transport bag included with the tent, certainly a must at this weight, especially if you're setting it up on your own, which can be done, but it's a lot easier with two, of course. Livability has been great with plenty of space for 4 people. The walls are more vertical than a lot of Quechua's other tents. Ceiling is pretty high at 2 meters, 15 centimeters. We've had no issues with condensation, lots of options for ventilation. No leaking at the seams or zips, and it's pretty silent in windy weather. Totally subjective, but I do like the look of the AirSeconds 6.3 better than a lot of their other offerings. It's less plasticky, more of an earthy, glamping kind of aesthetic. The inflatable tubes are on the inside, giving it more of a sleek look. There's some quality of life features as well, a nice insulated ground sheet, a good amount of storage compartments. Nothing earth-shattering, nothing revolutionary, just a well-rounded family tent. One last thing that I like a lot is the fact that just about every part of this tent is for sale on the Decathlon website. I know ideally, of course, things don't break or get lost, but when they do, it's just great knowing that you can get a replacement ground sheet or bag or pole or whatever in a matter of days. Okay, what don't I like? Well, the AirSeconds 6.3 was a good bit more expensive than I thought it would be because the moment that I put it in the trunk of my car, it was clear that we were going to need to buy a rooftop cargo box. For reference, this is the bag of my first €100 4-person Quechua tent next to the AirSeconds 6.3 bag. This is certainly not uncommon for a tent this size, especially made from a more durable fabric, but it's just one of the main advantages for me. It takes a lot of space in storage, but especially in the car, fills up the whole width of my trunk. So if you have a small or medium-sized car, be aware. There was very little shade in our camping spot in France the second summer we used it, so the tent was in full sun until about mid-afternoon at 32 degrees Celsius, and that was honestly too hot for comfort. I definitely believe that it would have been worse in a cheaper tent made from synthetic fabrics, but don't expect polycotton to be some kind of magic bullet. If anyone watching this has experience both in canvas and polycotton tents, let us know in the comments how much difference that would make. My takeaway is that even with a polycotton tent, site selection is still key, and if you don't get that choice, a sunshade to put over your tent is a nice thing to have. I've mentioned it already, but if you're looking at this because you've always wanted a canvas tent and you figure polycotton is the next best thing, you should be aware that, like I said, this is a fairly polyestery polycotton, which means that it's gonna feel different than a secondhand canvas tent that you could maybe find for the same budget. Not as soft, not as heat resistant probably, not as vintage, I suppose, but it's also going to be a bit stronger, pack lighter, dry faster. It all depends on what matters most to you. For me, I think the trade-off here is worth it. You do get a lot of the benefits of a cotton canvas tent while remedying some of the downsides. Not all of them though, because mold is definitely still a thing with a tent like this. You must dry it properly or it will mold. So you need either space to set it up outside when you're back home or a large enough place to let it dry inside. I actually moved a young tree in my garden to a different spot just to be able to set this up. So you actually need both a larger car and a larger house or garden for it. I guess I'm making it sound like a tent for rich people. Anyway, another thing to watch out for are stains, because polycotton isn't as good as synthetic fibers at just brushing off things like resin, bird poop, tree pollen. It's still gonna look good after a couple of trips, but don't expect it to look brand new. The first time we set it up, the pitch was a bit muddy, and that was very hard to get off. The ground sheet also, because it's just so large and unwieldy. So these days I put a tarp underneath, makes the floor feel even more carpet-like, and it's a lot easier to keep clean. Quality control used to be a bit iffy, especially in the beginning. In 2022, when this tent was launched, there were quite a few reviews from people complaining about the quality of the seams. And though I can't say that I've had any loose seams or problems of that nature, and I'm sure that Decathlon would set it right if I did have to cut off a lot of loose ends, and the stitching was occasionally a bit erratic. I haven't heard or read much about that since though, so it may have been just a temporary issue. Some people complain that the sleeping compartments are not dark enough. I'd argue that they're actually quite dark compared to a lot of other tents on the market. It's not an issue for me at all. But Quechua has had a lot of success with their fresh and black range. Clearly, a lot of people are very fond of sleeping in and doing so in a very dark tent. And apparently, this isn't quite dark enough. Decathlon doesn't brand this as fresh and black. They probably had to choose between darkness and optimal ventilation, but they do say on the website that it is 40 times less light than a normal tent. 40 times less, that's like going from, wait, let me dial this in. That's from this to this. I guess we'll just have to take their word for it. One thing that I would like to see changed is the length of the sleep compartments. I'm 185 centimeters, 6'1". That is about the same size as an average Dutch guy. So a lot of people are taller than I am. And given how spacious the AirSeconds 6.3 is, I don't quite get why its sleeping compartments only have the same amount of headroom as the smallest, cheapest 4-person tent that you can buy at Decathlon. Lastly, there's one feature that a lot of Quechua's newer tents have that I would really have loved on this one, and that is magnetic doors. The trailer tent has them, the teepee style tent has them, but in this one we're stuck with these big chunky zippers. They're great quality, but they are loud and they wake me up every time someone gets up in the night. I suppose that makes them great for theft prevention, but honestly, I just want to sleep. The AirSeconds 6.3 polycotton is currently priced at 1,300 euros, which is a lot by Decathlon standards. It's their most expensive tent if you don't count the trailer tent that we reviewed last year. And they also have a super weird inflatable bubble tent with an airlock that I never noticed before. Anyway, you can sleep 52 people in Decathlon's cheapest 4-person tent for the price of the AirSeconds 6.3. So it's expensive, and at the same time, it's decidedly not expensive compared to a Dutch canvas tent of the same size, because those can easily cost you north of 3K. So it's all about perspective. You can have an amazing holiday in a much cheaper tent. I know I have, but if you're gonna go camping every year, then you know, there's some livability and quality of life upgrades here that make a lot of sense. There's no reason that a tent that sleeps a whole family every summer and lasts as long as your children will realistically be interested in coming with you shouldn't be worth this much. I am very happy that Decathlon has decided to compete in the space of solid, long-lasting polycotton tents. So I'm happy that this tent exists. Am I also happy that I bought it? Yeah, pretty much. And if that does sound a bit hesitant, it's just because I'm still getting used to the amount of space that it takes up in the car. And that would be true for any comparably sized cotton or polycotton tent. So that's more of a car problem, really. But bottom line, this is a quality tent, a lot of features, easy to set up, no big downsides, at a very competitive price. Hope this was helpful. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask them in the comments, and see you next time.